All right. Hello, everyone. And hello, Simon and Owen. It's great to see you virtually. So I know all three of us were really excited coming out of Microsoft Ignite about a lot of the knowledge management announcements that were made. And we wanted to get together and talk a little bit about what we heard at Ignite, what we've listened to in terms of the recorded sessions since Ignite, and share some of our thoughts about knowledge management and the new announcements. How does that sound? All right, let me introduce myself. For those that don't know me, my name is Sarah Haase. I'm a librarian, an information architect, and a product manager. I'm based out of the Twin Cities, which is in Minnesota, and do a lot of blogging and run a little event called SharePoint Saturday Twin Cities. Owen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah and Simon. It's really good to see the both of you. I live outside of Seattle. I'm an architect for Microsoft 365 with a company named Zones. Zones is a seller of all things hardware and software and Microsoft 365 and Azure services. And it's a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, hi, I'm Simon. Yeah, it's great. So yeah, hi, I'm Simon Denton. I'm an architect for a company called Mott McDonald's, a global consulting engineers. And I'm currently a few miles just outside Birmingham in the UK. And yeah, it's great to be on this call to talk about all things knowledge management.
That's right. It's super exciting. So we're going to go through, and I think that we're going to cover some key points. So I have a few things that really stood out to me. I know Owen did as well. And for everyone who's listening, Simon is kind of our insider perspective on knowledge management. So he is going to help give some flavor to what Owen and I were going to be talking about and correct us where we missed up or say it wrong. Right, Simon?
That's my job.
He's the sayer of the three. So I'm really going to start with one of the sessions that I really loved. It was Naomi Moneypenny's session on enterprise and knowledge networks. And what I loved about her session, it's 30 minutes or so of Naomi just talking to the screen. There's not a single demo, and it's her really talking about why knowledge management and information architecture is important and how it plays into the role of AI. And she made this great comparison or analogy. She said that knowledge flowing in your organization is like stars connected to constellations in the sky. So we have stars in the sky, and since the dawn of time, we've been drawing lines between those stars to build out constellations that we can recognize. And the whole idea of knowledge management and Project Cortex and all of the AI capabilities is to draw those lines, to build out those constellations of knowledge in our organizations that can help us define the information that we need in an efficient way. What do you both think of that?
You know, I think that the graph is a killer technology, and for her to describe it like that makes it a lot easier to grasp for a lot of people. I think that one of the hard parts of the graph is making that connection in our minds from the virtual representations inside of tables and columns and spreadsheets that we've all seen into the virtual representation of a connection between an event and the people who attended that event and the documents that were used in that event and the almost three-dimensional connections that come between those. When a user makes that connection and we see that light bulb turn on, it makes such a difference. And that has to happen if you're going to have an understanding of the graph. And so I like how Naomi did that as well. I'm really glad that you called that out, Sarah.
Yeah, yeah. To be honest, I saw that theme running through that session and some of the other sessions. If you call the Azure AI sessions as well, they talk about these relationships, like people to content and content to people. I mean, you can no longer do that as a very traditional flat codified structure. I mean, you go to a library and there's numbers on the side of the spine, there's some 3 letters, but that's not going to connect people to content and content to people, is it? It's just, you know, you're going to walk in, you pull the book off, you hopefully get the right one. But that's been codified in a very rigid way. And we're moving into a time where information, yes, it can be codified, but the connections are so vast and so different and so fluid that you do need to start thinking about this in a 3-dimensional space, be it a nuclear model or a stars and constellations model. That interconnectivity is something that's dynamic and fluid, and that's why things like Cortex do have force diagrams within them showing the topic relationships, because that was the only way we could see a way of explaining relationships, showing gravity.
I love the way that you said that, Simon, because having being a librarian and getting a degree in library science, we were all about taxonomies and hierarchies, right? Where we had relatively rigid structures of taxonomies and hierarchies that we used to use to tag all of our content from a knowledge management perspective. And now it's all about dotted lines going in every direction in three-dimensional patterns to link ideas, concepts, and people together in an organization to make them work more efficiently, and leveraging the graph, as Owen was saying, to be able to do that. It's a whole new world.
That's right. And if you think about it, back to the library, book on the shelf, if you had a hidden camera that was hanging down, looking down at that book over the year or over a lifetime of the year, the different kinds of people who walk up, check that book out, take it, read it, put it back, that's what you're seeing going on now. It's not this linear sort of relationship. So I think it's a really good analogy to use stars and constellations or a molecular model. It's really good.
Yeah.
You know, the information management, the document management side of SharePoint and Office 365, or of all the products in the document management, information management space, have been playing catch up to the information to the data world for a long time, because so much information is caught in those documents. For those of, you know, we've all been in the industry for a while, and it used to be that with BizTalk Server and with MQ series, you could route data and transform data and send it out for approvals with no restrictions, because it was already in data format, and our documents are really have their information locked into paper. And we tried forever, like you said, Sarah, to use metadata to describe those documents, and then we would use the metadata to route the documents around, or to sort, or to try to prioritize what was important inside the documents based on the metadata. And the problem with that is that how can you efficiently build the metadata, right? I mean, some companies tried to use AI to extract entities and were successful in certain limited ways, but others, you know, almost gave up on metadata. And so we've seen metadata resurgences over and over again.
And metadata is for the users to think about, right? And we've tried so many things over the years, from, I remember implementing in SharePoint 2007 a clickable button that would auto tag the metadata, like click this button to tag these 3 metadata labels, and it would use a SharePoint designer workflow and do it automatically. And we tried all of these gimmicks to get people to tag things. So we're moving into a new era. And I kind of want to dovetail over to talking about an exciting announcement at Ignite, which is Microsoft SharePoint Syntex, which is the first official product from Project Cortex. And I hope I got that right, Simon.
Yes, you did. Yeah, you sure did. Yeah. So we've seen Syntex evolve as part of Project Cortex. So it's the SharePoint aspects of Project Cortex. This is the content extraction, processing, and content services around it. And it's really good for it to finally see the light of day. It was about a year ago when Cortex was announced, and you know, it's been a long year where we've been shaping as preview customers what this should look like, and it's really, really powerful about making these. You know, if you catch the session, they're talking about topics that start to permeate all the way through SharePoint without you putting that effort in of automatic classification. About starting to present a feedback loop to the SharePoint content that you're looking at, to being able to start processing those paper documents or those PDFs. And starting extracting meaningful information from them in different ways. It is really an exciting product. It's pretty mature too. I think they held on to it a bit longer, and to make sure that, you know, it's just so. And I think it's really, really good. It's well worth catching that session.
And for those that maybe haven't caught the session or heard of Syntex yet, it's really Syntex is the product, and I'm going to try and hopefully I say this right, Simon. It is the product that uses data models, and we'll talk more about data models in a few minutes, but it uses data models to be able, and artificial intelligence to be able to tag and identify content and knowledge real time. Yeah,
perfect. Absolutely spot on. Yeah. So it is the union of things like AI Builder, and you know, people have been seeing that in the Power Platform. Is the union of that with new locations and destinations within SharePoint. To give you that content processing, those content services. I think that's a key word that they called out, and they use in the session. They don't really talk about content management, right? because that implies a rigid framework. Right? This is content services allowing you to process your content in the way you need to extract meaningful knowledge, and that's the goal of Syntex.
The thing that has caught my imagination about SharePoint Syntex is that if it can help us take the data that is in paper or take the data that is in other digital formats that aren't already codified, and if it can help us accelerate into it, into SharePoint or into Microsoft 365, then all of the automation, the Power Automate, the workflows, the approvals, the reuse can be applied to that data. And right now, there's a little bit of a friction before we can apply that to that information. And so, and for business users who are working with Microsoft 365, this is the data that they work with most, right? This is not the data that's automated yet. The data that was already automated through EDI between companies, we've had workflow on that for a long time, but the paper stuff has always added delays and friction there. And this is our key. This holds so much potential to do that. And I'm really looking forward to, I know, Sarah, you had some more about the models, but maybe you can help us understand how those papers to SharePoint Syntex.
Yeah, so I really was fascinated by this whole idea of how the models get built. And so I watched a couple of sessions and learned a bit about this thing called the Content Center, which, and all these words seem to be, they're hard to say quickly. It's a content center, which is part of SharePoint Syntex. And Content Center itself, thank you, Simon, Content Center itself is a new type of a SharePoint site. And you get one out of the box with Syntex, but then you can create more content centers as you need them in your organization. You don't have to have multiples, but you can. And this content center is where you build and train the models, and then you deploy the models to your document libraries. And they laid out what I think is a simple 4-step process to do the models. And I'm sure, Simon, you've done many of these models, so I'm just going to outline the steps and then I'm going to toss it to you to talk more about them. But the idea is that when you start creating a new model, you first add files to it. And you have to do a minimum of 5 files they recommend. And you want good examples, and you want at least one non-example. And these good examples and non-example are going to help to teach the model how to differentiate between the content you want the model to apply to and the content that you don't. Then you have to classify those files, meaning label the good examples and the non-example. Then you have to bring up the files and literally highlight the words that you, from a human perspective, or myself from a human perspective, I find meaningful in those files. And you're literally teaching the artificial intelligence then how to scan other files that it finds and make its best guesstimate as to how it would go through and classify those files. And once you do that, then you basically can apply that model to document libraries, and you can build one model and apply it to many libraries. And you can actually have multiple models assigned to one document library. And here's, Simon, where it just gets so big that it's hard to think about.
Yeah, absolutely spot on, right? This is, if you think about the approaches before this, you would have been looking at regex methods and clue-based ways of extracting information, and that actually requires a certain mindset and a certain skill set to process the content. You actually have to kind of sit there, structure. Okay, I'm looking for this. I'm working that out. Okay, this pattern needs, if it looks like this is my rule, and you're starting to build clues and rules and you're structuring again. And actually what Syntex does is takes that process away effectively by you training it. And you don't need to be a knowledge practitioner or a knowledge management expert. You train it. This looks right. I want this. This doesn't look right. I don't want that. And that training process is very quick. And you're right, it's just 5 documents, which is the minimum threshold to work it through. And you work it through, this is good, this is bad, and you train it and you feed it back, give it some more information. But the really powerful bit is once the models are created, they're models you can call up and reuse, rinse and repeat. You drop them into a Power Automate. And so we've got routing models. So you drop a document in what would be, you might call a drop-off library in the past, maybe. You drop it off in a library. and you run a simple model over it. Is this keyword here? Is this logo here? Is this bit of text here? If not, route it to here. If it's here, route it to there. If it's not, put it there. And once it's in the other place, you can run more models and say, actually, now this is here, extract this metadata, put it there. Extract this, put that there. And
So
the
is the way,
applications are endless, and I know, Owen, that's what you want to talk about.
yeah.
well, is the that's interesting. I was wondering if there was a way to get in. I have not been in the preview program like you have, Simon. So I was wondering if you intercepted that process somewhere else, but you're suggesting it goes from document library to document library to document library.
Yeah.
And in between those, you could do stuff on it or run other models. Okay. You know, the thing that this caught me, I've been doing a lot of work with compliance the last 9 or 10 months, if you will. And there's a content classifier component in compliance as well, that not just looking for the text like this, it must be built on the same technology, and maybe Simon knows that, but it also identifies formatting of documents. And so based on the formatting of documents, like, oh, there's a name and address entry field at the top or at the bottom or whatever, it can identify what type of purchase order it might be or what type of receipt it might be. And that allows for the more specific application of rules then to, or models, I guess, in this case, in order to extract data. Because you can also look for document types. So it sounds like this is giving us the flexibility not just to scan for significant entities within the document, but also to identify the document types. And those could then, I guess, in another document library have their own models applied to them. So this is going to keep librarians busy, I think, for a while.
It will,
Yeah.
and that is the extension of the Syntex model, right? So you can see how you talk about compliance and policy and the way they classify things and data label retention policies and like. So you can imagine that's one plane here, and Microsoft have worked on here, and the Project Cortex Syntex team are coming up, and the two things will start to pull together. So you can start applying your retention labels based on rule based on the AI that making a detection, rather than you writing a rule that says if it's content type 0, 1x, apply this, right? And so that is the trajectory they're on. They're bringing that together and mixing that with Azure-based AI tech. It's an exciting.
Do you know
place
what I love as a librarian? That in order to build any of these models, you have to build it on a content type. And I swear, I deliver a lot of sessions on content types. I've been living on content types since about 2007, since SharePoint 2007, literally. And here it comes back again, because every time that we think that the type of content and a content type isn't important, it's proven once again that it's an essential baseline foundational element in being able to process our data. That kind of brings us full circle almost. Simon, any final thoughts on things that you think we need to tell the folks that we haven't already mentioned?
Before a final thought, I have one more question though. Simon, you're in the preview program. You probably can't talk about futures, but in last year's Ignite, when they were teasing us with Cortex, they did talk about how it would aggregate data and create its own projects or its own teams or give you insight into that kind of stuff. And we didn't see that in this announcement, but as I was watching the Cortex announcements at Ignite, and I hope everyone goes through and watches those sessions, I was waiting for them to talk that. And so in the back of my head, I was already making these connections, and I waited for them to say, and you can have compliance and security rules be applied based on membership relationships that Project Syntex creates through its things. Will we get to that, do you think?
Yeah.
Right. That is, now maybe that's not for librarians, maybe that's for security guys, but that is a next level holy grail where I don't have to apply my security and compliance rules based on pre-existing relationships, but I can have the relationships be inferred by the AI so that they can automatically and document can be secured even before I realize that a group with security rules needs to be created.
I think you're cottoning on to their direction of travel, right? And so this,
right.
This might be a 3-year sort of.
I'm excited about this.
The story here, though, what we have already identified is it's making librarians security folks, IT geeks, and the general public who's interested in stars and constellations.
All
we're
hail
all
librarians.
direction.
That's right. Our librarian
Thank you
overload.
both. This has been a great conversation, and we definitely recommend everybody go out and watch some of those Ignite videos about knowledge management. They are well worth it, and a great job done by the Microsoft team. And definitely Naomi Moneypenny's done a great job leading that team down this path.
Oh yeah, she certainly has.
See you later, Vice.
See you later. Thanks.
Yeah.